right, we have two with us here in person and we have a couple of folks online. So we're coming right up on 7 p.m. So Matt, if you're ready to get started, I'm just going to go through some of the hybrid information about our hybrid program today.
Sure thing.
For everyone here in person and at home tonight, we are using a hybrid format. That means we have attendees viewing both in person and online. If you're watching from home, know that we're using the webinar format, which means you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. We're going to have a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation. If you're watching on Zoom, you can submit your questions at any time by entering them into the Q&A feature. You can find this on your Zoom toolbar by clicking on the button that looks like two speech bubbles. If you don't see this button, click on More or the button with the 3 dots to find the Q&A feature. For those of you in person with us, please hold your questions until the end and I'll bring the microphone around and you can ask questions if you like. That way the people on Zoom can hear you. Let's see. For those of you on Zoom, if you would like to see captions, click the button on your toolbar that says Show Captions. Again, if you don't see this button, click on More or the 3 dots and then select Captions. In this room, we do have the assisted listening system. If you'd like to borrow one of the devices, they're in the back of the room. You just have to turn them on. They're just headphones. Also, silence your cell phones and your devices. Let's see. Bathrooms are down the hallway near the parking lot entrance. And I will put some information in the chat about what to do if you're having any technical difficulties at home. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple of our upcoming programs. So tomorrow, Wednesday, we do have a program called Discovery of a Masterpiece. It's about a person who's going to be doing a talk about how she uncovered a masterpiece that had been lost to the art world since the 1930s. It's been authenticated as a work of Rodin, so you can hear the story about how a simple cataloging project evolved into one of the biggest art finds in recent history. So that's going to be in person with a virtual presenter. This Thursday, we do have our genealogy club. And then on Tuesday, the 20th, we have a program called Hidden Mickeys, where a Disney expert is going to tell us all about finding the hidden Mickeys at Disney World. So if you're interested in any of those, you can contact the reference desk and we can get you registered for that. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Matt.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. And thanks to everybody who's attending both virtually and in person. I was supposed to be there in person today, but I am under the weather, so I didn't want to spread any germs to folks who are there in person. So appreciate the flexibility. But my name is Matt Harvey and I work with CUB, or the Citizens Utility Board. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here and we can just dive right in. Like Rachel mentioned, at the end, I'll take about, say, 10 or 15 minutes to answer any questions folks might have. And make sure this is good to go. Oh, and then I think, a couple slides ahead here. I'm not sure what's going on here. There we go. We're back at the beginning. I think everybody should see it, but if not, Rachel, go ahead and just let me know. But I think everybody should be seeing this now. But again, my name is Matt Harvey and I work with CUB, or the Citizens Utility Board. CUB is a nonprofit organization that fights the utility companies here in Illinois. So if you ever have a question or a complaint about your utility bills or the utility companies in general, we're the organization to contact. So essentially, whenever the utility companies excuse me, attempt to raise their rates or pass legislation that isn't very consumer friendly, we're the folks who go after them. And that's in front of the Illinois Commerce Commission, which is the Public Utility Commission here in Illinois, the General Assembly or the legislature, and the various courts here in Illinois. So our MO is helping folks out. So if there is one thing you remember today, let it be that we have this 1-800-669-5556 number that you can contact Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. We have a bunch of experts who staff that hotline. I should say handful, not a bunch. We have a handful of experts that staff that hotline that can answer any questions you might have about your utility bills, to even stuff like cutting cable and going to streaming, or does it make sense to get solar panels? We answer all of those questions. So definitely keep this number in your back pocket for a future resource. We also have this citizensutilityboard.org link, and this is where you can find several of our resources. So everything I'll be talking about today, there are resources or fact sheets directly housed excuse me, on our website that you can check out. And we cover a variety of topics, and we have a really great blog too that we publish in hopes to keep people up to date on some of the things that we're working on. So I am a part of the grassroots department at Cubs. So I spend a lot of time in rooms like this one, both virtual and in person, talking about the various issues that we're working on. We do about 500 events a year, and there's only, I want to say there's like five or six outreach staffers. So we spend a lot of time talking to folks like yourselves about the various issues that we're working on. So if you're interested in checking out another workshop or one of our other events, you can of course go to our website and look at our calendar. We have a lot of stuff similar to this, but we also have some different events where we cover stuff like solar and geothermal. Some of it's in person, some of it's virtual. So it's definitely worthwhile going to our website and checking out the calendar and seeing what we have going on. We also, I kind of mentioned this already, but we do have some really great media and publications that our communications team puts together. I think they do a really stellar job of taking this kind of complicated utility information and boiling it down in a way that we can all understand it, myself included. So again, citizensutilityboard.org is a really great resource for that. And then lastly, we advocate for affordable and sustainable energy policies here in Illinois. So right now, we think that there is a nice intersection that exists between affordability and sustainability. For example, if you are to use less energy in your own home, you're ultimately going to save some money, right, by using less energy. But you're also reducing your your carbon footprint, so you're kind of reducing your energy burden or your carbon impact in that way too. So you can do both at the same time, and we think you can accomplish that with some smart policy making in Illinois. So we spend a lot of time talking about that, and depending on how much time we have left at the end after I get through kind of like the main program, we might be able to talk about some of the solar incentives and some of that fun stuff. But we'll see how much time we have. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to start with our utility bills, so electric and gas bills. And I'm going to share with you all some of the things that I look at when I'm looking at these utility bills. Because again, I spend a lot of time in the field. We do these events called utility bill clinics, where we sit down with folks and analyze their bills one-on-one, and we look for things like overusage, billing errors, etc. So I'm going to share with you what I look for when I'm at one of those events. And I think, again, to use a cliche, knowledge is power. So I think knowing what's going on with your bill can be really important when you're trying to navigate this space. So this is a ComEd bill. It's from 2020, so it's a little bit older, but all the information is still relevant. One of the first things that I look at when I'm looking at an electricity bill is the total usage, which is outlined in this yellow oval here. This is a great place where we can see what we're using month to month. We can compare, for example, this October and this bill, which again, it's older, so it's October of 2020, and then comparing it to October of 2019. I think this particular piece is one of the most important because this is where you can identify any inconsistencies that are happening on your bill. Because they're same month, right? Just different years. So you should see some consistency. But on this particular bill, in the October of 2019, they only used 52 kWh or kilowatt hours. Whereas this particular October, they used 201 kilowatt hours. So that's a pretty big jump. And that would be a red flag. This particular consumer moved October, November billing cycle. So that's why we're seeing this inconsistency here. However, if you were looking at your bill and you saw something similar, again, that could be a red flag and would require some kind of detective work or investigation to see what's going on there. You can also, excuse me, use the box to the right here, which is the average daily use box. It helps us hone in more on what we're seeing with our monthly usage. So you can see what you're using daily as far as kilowatt hours go. Most importantly, you can see if you are up or down from last year. So again, this consumer is up quite a bit from last year, is 272% up from last year. So again, if you saw this on your bill, that would be a pretty big red flag, and that would be something you would want to investigate. If you look up just to the top right here, you can also see the average temperature of that month. And I think that's also really important, especially with the kind of weather that we're seeing this year and we have been seeing over the past couple of years, right? We have these transition months, April, May, September, October, and kind of November, right, where we might see some really warm days, we might see some cold days. So if you do see some inconsistency, it could potentially be because we're just having weird weather. Maybe it was really warm on a month that shouldn't be, and you were running your air conditioning, so that's why you're seeing a jump. But again, I digress. I think this particular piece of the bill is just a really good place to do this detective work, to see what's going on, and to see if you're just having any over usage issues, and maybe it's a device that's failing, or maybe you need to change the filters out in your furnace. But this is a place where we can start that investigation. So on the bottom here, we have current charges summary, which we're going to come back to this in a second here, but this is just a general breakdown of where our money is going on our bill, which if you were to flip, oh, there we go. If we were to flip to the back of the bill, you can see a much more granular breakdown of the different pieces of our bill. And there are three main ones. So you have supply, delivery, and then taxes and fees. Taxes and fees, there's not a ton that we can do, right? This is like all things in life, we have to pay a little bit extra taxes and fees. But this also covers some of the programs that we'll talk about a little bit later. So you're paying for a variety of different things in here. And then the way that you're paying for them is based on how much you're using. So you could see here, this consumer was using 201 kilowatt hours, and they were multiplying it by a set factor to get the general taxes and fees out. So not a ton you can do here. Delivery is in the same boat. So delivery is where we pay for getting the energy from point A being generation, to point B being our homes. So we're essentially paying a rental fee of sorts for the infrastructure that gets the energy from the generation to our homes where we live, or the places that we work and play, et cetera. And there's not a ton you can do here either. So if you live in Northern Illinois, with the exception of a few municipalities that have their own utility, a municipal utility or co-op utility, like 99.5% of the time you are going to be with ComEd in Northern Illinois, because they own the infrastructure for electricity. There are two things that you can do, though, I will say, for delivery and taxes and fees to somewhat lower these pieces. So the first one we kind of already talked about in a little bit of detail, and that's a lot of these factors are multiplied by how much we're using, or charges are multiplied by how much we're using. So lowering your usage in your home can ultimately lower these pieces of the bill. The second thing is staying in contact with CUB, or consumer advocates like CUB, because whenever you hear about a utility raising their rates or trying to get some more money on our bills, generally speaking, it's going to happen on delivery and sometimes on taxes and fees. So CUB goes to these smoke-filled rooms and tries to fight for us as consumers or ratepayers to make sure that we're keeping those rate hikes down, or trying to cancel them altogether. And it's really challenging because the utilities have some really fancy attorneys that are in the same spaces advocating for these rate hikes. So in order to combat that, it is really helpful to have community voices uplifting us as we go into those spaces. So if you stay in contact with CUB, go to our website, fill out our petitions, get on our email list, that stuff really does help. And then it ultimately helps keeps costs down for all Illinoisans as well. The last piece of our bill on the back is supply. And supply is where you pay for what you're actually using. And there can be different companies that take over this particular piece. So the default supplier in ComEd territory, of course, is ComEd. So if you were to cancel your service, set up shop again at a new apartment, you would default to ComEd, right? And most folks in this room most likely have ComEd. Actually, you might have a different supplier, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Your municipality has done something with the supplier, but there are different companies out there that can take over this supply portion. So this consumer has a company called Energy Plus Holdings. So we can tell right here, because it has the hyphen and then Energy Plus Holdings name. Also, if you go to the front of your bill on this blue square here, it says supply. And then if you have ComEd, it would say ComEd provides your energy. But if you do have an alternative supplier, it'll have their name. In this case, it's Energy Plus Holdings for this consumer, provides their energy. And then it has their telephone number as well. So going back to the back of the bill, the way you can tell if you are saving money with one of these suppliers or losing money with one of these suppliers is pretty simple. So you would look here, you're what they call it a commodity charge. It could have a couple different names based on the supplier, but it has 201 kWh or kilowatt hours, which is how much the consumer is using, at or multiplied by 15.9 cents is what this consumer is being charged, which most folks are probably like, well, that's kind of arbitrary, right? I don't know what 15.9 cents means, like, and what it's in relation to. However, if you look to the right part of the bill under ComEd, has price to compare, and it says the ComEd electric supply price to compare is 7.067 cents per kilowatt hour. And again, this bill was older, so this was the price to compare at the time, which price to compare means the default rate for electricity. So if you were to set up, again, a new service with ComEd, you would default to their supply price, which would be 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Whereas this consumer was paying 15.9 cents with this particular supplier. So this person was paying more than double to have this service. And I would argue that there's really no benefit to signing up with one of these companies unless they're saving you money. And in this particular case, that is not happening. This consumer is losing quite a bit of money. So this $31 supply charge would have most likely been closer to $14 or $15 had they been just with ComEd's default rate. These different, not utility companies, but alternative retail electric suppliers is the fancy name for them. We call them suppliers for short. These suppliers oftentimes will come door to door. They'll call, they'll be on social media. Sometimes they're even at the movie theater or seen them at the hardware store before, and they'll try to solicit your services. And we consider those individual contracts. And those, generally speaking, are bad news. And folks end up losing money over the lifespan of that contract with these suppliers. And if you find that you do have an alternative supplier and then you check the price to compare and you are losing money, we would definitely encourage you to cancel that contract with those suppliers. The way you could do that, you do find you're losing money, is you go back to the front part and you just need to give them a call. So if in this particular consumer's case, I would encourage them to call this number and then cancel with the supplier. Once they do that, they don't need to contact ComEd, or you wouldn't need to contact ComEd. It would automatically default back to ComEd, and you don't have to do anything. ComEd will send you a letter in the mail signaling that you have made a change on your bill, and you won't need to do anything else. And a lot of times when you cancel with these suppliers, they'll give you a confirmation number. You can write that down just in case something doesn't happen as planned. But most of the time when you do cancel with them, it should be pretty seamless. So ComEd's rate right now, because this bill is older, it's from 2020 and the rate was 7 cents at the time. But right now, ComEd's rate is 6.8 cents. It just changed. ComEd's default rate changes once in the summer in June 1st, and then once in the fall, usually October 1st. So we just went from about 6 cents, 9.8 or 9.6 cents to 6.8 cents. So it went down, which is great. And then again, this is subject to change in the fall. That's how it works. It changes every 6 months because we, generally speaking, use more electricity during the summertime. So sometimes that can negatively impact the rates during the summer. This particular summer season, though, they went down, which is kind of nice surprise. There are, like I mentioned, 2 different contracts, though, with the alternative suppliers. So you have the individual solicitations through these companies, but you can also have something called a municipal aggregation. And this is why I paused when I said you all might have ComEd, because most likely if you are an Elmhurst resident, you most likely have a company called Allego Energy, and that is because it was negotiated by your municipality. Excuse me. So the municipal aggregations were designed so municipalities can open up their residents to a broad contract. And the general idea is that because so many people are signing up in this particular contract, that these alternative suppliers are more incentivized to pass on a better deal or a better contract. And there's just a bit more oversight built in because of the municipality looking into this, which is the case for Elmhurst. So y'all are with Allego Energy, and it's set at ComEd's price to compare. So it's set at the default rate, and it's set to expire May 31st, 2023. So you have a year left on this contract. And I was looking on the website earlier today, and it looks like the particular contract that was set up with Allego is a renewable energy certificate program, or REC program, which means that Allego Energy is doing a 1-to-1 carbon offset with the amount of energy that's being procured by the residents in Elmhurst. So you're not necessarily getting savings, it's the default rate of ComEd, but you are getting some environmental benefit from being with this company, which is pretty neat because you're not paying more, you don't have to do anything. It's just kind of a standard setup, but then Elmhurst might be getting some kind of renewable energy benefit or a REC benefit from this particular contract. So if you are looking at your bill and you see that you have Allego Energy, double check to make sure that it's at ComEd's price to compare and it is that particular municipal aggregation contract. But ultimately, at the end of the day, with alternative suppliers, the most important thing is to look at how much you're being charged, compare it to the price to compare. And if it's the same as the price to compare or you're saving money, it's worthwhile to keep it, but keep an eye on it. And then if you find that you're losing money, it's worthwhile to cancel that contract. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move to gas. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or for folks who are in person, we'll make sure that you get a chance to ask a question at the end too. So gas structurally is very similar to electricity. It looks a bit different, but a lot of the concepts that we just took some time going through translate almost seamlessly to the gas bill. So the general breakdown of the gas bill is delivery, natural gas cost, which is synonymous with supply, and then taxes and fees. And then, of course, one of the things that I look at right off the bat when I'm taking a look at a gas bill in the field is the month-to-month usage. Excuse me again. This same thing, you want to make sure that you're seeing some consistency here. This particular consumer also moved. So I apparently just handpick all the bills where people move. So we get kind of like a weird snapshot here. But you could compare, again, this January to last year's January to make sure that you're in a pretty similar boat. And then we even have the price to compare here, which is underneath. It's the bottom value here. So it changes month to month, which we'll talk about in a second. And then it also has the average temperature. So not as thorough as the electricity breakdown, but we do have some nice kind of like granular data here, so we can do that detective work if we need to. So delivery and taxes and fees, same boat, right? Not a ton you can do except for to reduce your usage and stay in contact with CUB. The one big difference on gas compared to electricity is the natural gas cost or supply changes month to month. So ComEd's rate, electricity rate in general, even if you're downstate with Ameren, changes once in June, once in October, whereas with gas, it changes every single month. So that is why you see a December charge and a January charge. Most folks have a billing cycle that ends up between 2 months, right? There's never a perfect full January month. Most folks have some days, you know, for example, in this particular billing cycle in December, and then, you know, a handful of days in January. And that's why you have these separate line items. At the time, this is an older bill as well. It was 29 cents per therm, which you can see down here, and that's how you know what you're being charged. But it was 29 cents month to month. But this could potentially be different. Sometimes the rate stays the same, sometimes it changes, but again, it's subject to change month to month. So that's what you see there. And if you're curious about, again, the price to compare, you can look over here at the right side of the bill, and then under these particular bar graphs and months, you can see what that price to compare rate per therm, not kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is electricity, therm is gas, but you can see what the rate is per therm. You're probably wondering what these yellow arrows are up here, and this would signal if something filled in between these two boxes, that means you would have an alternative supplier or additional products and services. So similarly to electricity, we also see alternative suppliers in the gas market, which I have a bill that we can see here with an alternative supplier. So two things to note here. You can see that some stuff filled in on the right in this yellow oval, but also if you look to the left, we have delivery charges, we have taxes and fees, but that middle charge, natural gas cost, like we see here, has disappeared and was then moved over to this side. And this is where you would see what alternative supplier you have, and then also what they're charging you. It's a little more complicated. It's not as cut and dry on the ComEd or like the ComEd bill, but here you can see it has what you paid. This particular consumer paid $72 from their last billing cycle. And then you can see on this line item here, how many therms you're using, and then what the rate per therm was at the time, which they're being charged 43 cents per therm. And if we look down here, it was actually 26 cents per therm through the utility. So there seems to be a theme here, right? These companies tend to charge folks a bit more, and it's almost double what the rate was from March for Nicor proper. So even though these rates change month to month, a lot of times these companies, these alternative suppliers will offer fixed rate plans, because they're like, hey, gas is super variable, right? Sign up with us and you can have this fixed rate for, you know, an extended period of time. But this consumer, again, was being charged 43 cents per therm. And if you look down here, not once did it go over 43 cents per therm. So they were overpaying every single month that they've been in this contract, assuming that they've been in this contract for, you know, since March of 2019 on this particular bill. So alternative suppliers for gas, same deal. If you find that you're being overcharged by an alternative supplier on gas, you can call them and you cancel, and you don't need to contact NICOR. It just bumps right back into NICOR, and they'll send you a notice that you're leaving that contract. So now you guys are officially experts in reading your bill somewhat, right? So you have a good idea of exactly what's going on there. But now I would assume most folks are probably wondering, okay, well, if I can't save money by switching to an alternative supplier, what are some ways that I can save money? Which I should mention right now, I forgot to mention this, the current rate for gas is 39 cents per therm, which this winter, it was as high as $1 per therm. So it's gone down pretty significantly, but gas is a pretty volatile entity at this point in time because of a variety of factors: climate change, war in Ukraine, less gas exploration. All of those factors are creating kind of a volatile gas market right now. But there are some ways that folks can save some money on their utility bills, and we're going to cover a couple different ways. The first one might not be for everybody, but there are some financial assistance programs that can help reduce the burden of both our electricity and our gas bill. So the first one I want to mention is something called LIHEAP, or the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which is essentially a financial grant for both your gas and electric bill. And it depends on where your income's at, and that's the size of the grant that they give you. But if you are interested in applying for this particular program, you would need to contact CETA, which is Cook County's community action agency. So you have their number listed here, and then also this link. I will share my slides with Rachel, and then she can then send them to everybody, so you don't have to write down all these links. You can kind of thumb through my slides. LIHEAP, though, is an income qualified program, so it's 200% of the federal poverty level, which I don't know off the top of my head, but if folks have any questions about that, I'd be happy to look it up for you and send it your way. But it is 200% federal poverty level is how you would access this program. And I believe the funds for LIHEAP have closed this year. It's typically a fall to winter program. And generally speaking, the funds dry up around May, which I believe was the case, but it will open back up around September. The next program is one called Share the Warmth, which, I guess Share Warmth is for People's Gas, but there's the gas sharing program for NICOR customers, which for NICOR customers, eligible customers can receive up to $500 on their gas bill. This will also be about 200% federal poverty level, but in order to apply in NICOR territory, you would need to visit your local Salvation Army in person to see if they do have the funds available still. But this is a really good program for folks who might be behind on their bill or have a large past due. You might be able to get that assistance if there is money available and you do qualify. The last program I want to mention on this slide is the Illinois Home Weatherization Assistance Program, or IWAP. And this is a program for folks that can receive, or you can receive, free appliances and services up to, it's $16,000 now. I need to change that figure. But essentially they'll do some just energy efficiency and weatherization upgrades in your home. They cover, again, a pretty significant amount. It's about $16,000. They do air sealing, attic and wall insulation, HVAC repair and or replacement, water heater repair and or replacement, lighting and refrigerator replacement. And then they also have a couple $1,000s allotted to do some ventilation and moisture control measures. So if they find something like mold, when they're doing this work, they have some wiggle room to solve that or try to figure that out and improve that situation. This would also be administered through CETA here in Cook County, which we have their number down there. And this would also be 200% federal poverty level. These all tend to use that same metric. Now, lastly, for folks in Cook County, there is a program that instead of being 200% federal poverty level, it's actually 80% area median income. And this is kind of similar to IWAP. It's like a step down version of IWAP, the weatherization program we just mentioned. It's a joint program through ComEd, People's Gas, and the Bungalow Association, but it's for all of Cook County. And it's for homes that are built, it's a single family home or a 2-flat build that's at least 30 years old. And again, it's 80% area median income. So a household of 4 would need to be at 83,000 or lower. So federal poverty level for that is generally in the 20,000 range, whereas this is in the 80,000 range. So it's a bit more sweeping, and more folks could then get plugged into this program. In order to apply for this, you would need to make sure you're qualified. You need to, again, be the 80% area median income and then meet some of the other qualifications of making sure your home's at least 30 years old, it's owner occupied, located in Cook County, But if you do check off some of these boxes, you can go to chicagobungalow.org/apply, or you can call their number 312-675-0300 to see if you can get signed up. So those are financial assistance programs. And again, those are income qualified, so it might not be for everybody, but I think it's important to mention them because some folks might be qualified and don't realize it and don't know that there's some money that can help assist you when times get tough. So for folks who might even be qualified for financial assistance, but also folks who don't qualify for financial assistance, energy efficiency, I think, is one of the most important and easiest ways to reduce on our bills. And we kind of have a little goofy mantra at the Cub office, and it's the cheapest kilowatt hour / therm is the one you don't use. And that doesn't mean live by candlelight. That just means using energy more efficiently in a way where we can still, benefit from using energy whenever we want, but just doing it in a way that is a little more efficient. So the first thing is energy efficient lighting, which about 15% of our overall electricity bill comes from lighting. And if you're still using incandescent light bulbs, the old school light bulbs, you're missing out on some really good savings opportunities, because CFLs, compact fluorescent light bulbs, or LEDs, light emitting diodes, just the newer bulbs, use about 80% less than an incandescent bulb. So ultimately, you could reduce that 15% by about 80% just by switching out your light bulbs. There is a program through the utilities that I'll mention in a few slides here where you can get some free LED light bulbs. So you wouldn't have to spend any money to do it. You can just sign up for this program. It's pretty neat. It's a good way to reduce on your bill. Get some newer lighting in the house too. The next thing is something called vampire power. Vampire power is where appliances are passively drawing energy even when they're not being used. There was a study done by the Natural Resources Defense Council a few years ago that found, they looked at a large sample of Northern California homes, and they found that approximately 23% of their overall power consumption came from vampire power alone. And they attributed that to newer appliances, stuff like, smart speakers, Bluetooth speakers. I never remember the name of them, but like the Amazon Echoes or Alexa Echoes, whatever those things are called. It's the little boxes you can yell at them and they tell you the weather. These new smart appliances that we're bringing into our homes are constantly running data. They're constantly processing information. So because of this, we're seeing that the vampire load in most houses is going up pretty significantly. Some of the newer appliances we are starting to see come to the market are addressing this issue, and they have kind of built-in features that eliminates this vampire power. But we still encourage folks, if you have some devices in your home that are plugged in but potentially could be drawing that passive energy, to unplug them if you don't use them. So it's even simple, silly stuff like little clocks. For example, in my particular situation in my house, and in our kitchen, we have a coffee pot with a clock, we have a microwave with a clock, and we have a stove with a clock. And I really only use the stove clock. And my microwave and my coffee pot are conveniently located on the same countertop space. So I just unplug both of them when I'm not using it, because I don't really use that clock. And it's no reason to have that energy passively being drawn from those appliances. So just going around in your home and looking for those appliances that might be drawing that energy passively and unplugging them if you can. And if it's easy for you to do that, it can make a pretty big difference. You'll never get 23% to zero, because some vampire power is needed. Think like a refrigerator. Maybe you have like a DVR player and you can't miss the next Survivor or whatever the big show is, and you want to record that. Like that's passive energy drawn. We don't necessarily want to get rid of that, but it's mostly the idea of controlling for that and just unplugging stuff that we're not using regularly. The next thing is taking advantage of programmable thermostats or smart thermostats if you have one. So a lot of times folks will just kind of set it and forget it with their programmable thermostat. I've been guilty of that in the past, because sometimes it can be tricky to set it, right? You're just like, whatever, it's on 74, I'm leaving the house, I'm done with it. But if you find that you have a regular schedule or routine, you can save a decent amount of energy and money by trying to tier what your temperature is at based on when you're in and out of the home. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're going to work every day from 9 to 5 and nobody else is in the house. So you can keep the temperature at the desired temperature when you're home, but then you can set it to cycle down or up depending on the season when you leave the home. And then maybe an hour or two before you get back home, you can have it cycle back to that desired temperature. So you're not heating or cooling the home excessively for nobody, for an empty house, right? It's taking advantage of this technology as it should be. And every programmable thermostat or smart thermostat has that function in it. So it's definitely worthwhile looking up your model and trying to figure that out. And I know some of them can be really tricky. I'm an apartment dweller in Chicago, and you're kind of subject to whatever the landlord puts in. And I know some of the devices I've had have been pretty tricky, but I find that if I just go online and look up their manual, I can usually find it and try to program it. The numbers you want to aim for are 68 degrees in the winter and then 78 degrees in the summer. Those are the ideal temperatures as far as comfort and efficiency go. And I know some of those might be too cold or too warm for some folks, but you just want to try to aim for those numbers if you can. And then, of course, I've mentioned this already, but smart thermostat's a really great option. Makes it a bit easier to program your thermostat if you do have a smarter option or smart thermostat, because a lot of it can be done through a smartphone and it's pretty straightforward. So definitely worth looking into. If you go on ComEd's website, they have a marketplace where you can look up different appliances, and they have the incentives or the rebates built in on their marketplace. So you can find some pretty cheap smart thermostats on there if you're in the market for one. The next thing is ceiling fans. So the most important thing with ceiling fans is fans cool people, not rooms. I always like to mention that because I think some folks are accustomed to just keeping them running. But we find that it's just moving air around. It's just cooling the people in the room, not necessarily cooling the room down in general. So it's just you're feeling that air moving around, and it makes you feel cooler or warmer depending on the season. And most ceiling fans have an option to change the way the blade spins. So if you change it clockwise during the winter, heat rises, so it pushes that heat down. And then you can change it to counterclockwise during the summer in the reverse to make it so it pulls up the cold air that falls, because cold air falls, right? Heat rises, cold air falls, and you can change it to move that air around more efficiently. Lastly, we have a utility energy efficiency program. So if you're somebody who's like, Matt, I've done all this stuff, I'm like as efficient as I can be in my home, I definitely think it's worthwhile checking out some of the programs we have available to us in ComEd and NICOR territory. So the first one I want to mention is something called hourly pricing. So hourly pricing is a program where you will pay the hour-to-hour rates of electricity. So again, we pay a fixed rate if you're just with ComEd's default rate that changes 2 times a year, right? Once in June, once in October. And that is an average of all of these rates here, because technically electricity changes based on demand, and it changes quite a bit. I took this from last month, May 6th. You could see the price went from 2 cents to 6 cents, and then it fell back to 2. It even went into the negatives for some reason at 3 p.m. So let's say you're somebody who signed up for this program and you own an electric vehicle, and you were charging your electric vehicle at 3 p.m. The price was in the negatives, so effectively you would be building a credit if you're using energy at the time. But the reverse is also true. When the price does jump, which in some cases it does, this is from May 6th, this is from May 8th, you can see that it's color-coded. Green means good, of course. Orange means not so good. Red means really bad, don't use energy. But if you were to charge your electric vehicle or do the dishes or do the dishwashing at this time, you would be charged a bit more, right? You would be hit a little bit harder. Whereas if you moved that big ticket usage outside of these peaks to times where electricity is a bit lower, I don't know if folks are up at 5 a.m. getting ready to do their dishes or whatever. But even if you look at times like 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. here, the price per kilowatt hour is only about 2.5, 3 cents, which at the time, the price per kilowatt hour for electricity for the default rate was 9 cents. So most of these times were a bit lower than what ComEd's rate was. So on average, folks save about 15% with this program, assuming you're using it correctly, because if you don't manage to move your usage, big ticket usage outside of these peaks, you will be hit pretty hard. But if you have the flexibility in your home to do the dishes at a different time, you go online, you see what the live prices are, you say, oh, it's a bit high, it's in the orange or red category, I'll wait till it goes down. You can save quite a bit of money. When I was on the program, I lived with a couple of roommates. and we were saving about 30%. So it was a pretty stellar program, and we didn't do a whole lot as far as like moving our usage outside of it. Our just like natural usage habits kind of aligned with hourly pricing. But you can see here, they send you a general breakdown over email every month. So you can see if you're saving or losing. So it'll give you your total savings. And then if you look down here to the bottom half, it'll show you what your bill would have been on ComEd's fixed price program, and then what you paid with hourly pricing. So this particular month, I believe this was, I want to say 2020, 2021 when I was on this program, I had saved about 32% or $13. So it's pretty solid. The reason I am not on this program anymore, there's a small caveat. If you use 400 kilowatt hours or less on average, you might not be able to benefit from this program because there's a capacity charge that's assigned to it. And then it could turn out to be a wash, or you could lose money if you are a low end user. But if you use 400 kilowatt hours or more, you are a very good candidate for this program. So folks who have electric heat, who have electric vehicles, et cetera, who use just kind of a higher base load of energy tend to really reap the benefits from this program. So again, this is called hourly pricing, and you can go to hourlypricing.comed.com to check it out. You can play around with the different dates to see what the price of electricity is that day and what they expect it to be in future days. And you can also play around with just being on the program. So you could sign up and you could try it for a couple months to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you can just cancel and go back to ComEd's default rate. Because this is all ComEd. It's all structured through that particular utility. Downstate Ameren, that utility also has a similar program that folks can check out. And it's a really good way to save money and to reduce your carbon footprint, because when we see these prices spike, generally speaking, we need to make sure that we have energy online. So we turn on these things called peaker plants that are dirty fossil fuel powered generators. They cost a lot of money here in Northern Illinois. It's to the tune of a couple $2 billion every year. It's ratepayer subsidized to make sure that we have energy online at these times. However, we think it would be much better if we could just rely on consumer habitual changes and using programs like hourly pricing to get folks to move outside of these peaks, so we don't have to rely on those really expensive dirty power plants. The next program I want to mention is peak time savings, and this is all carrot, no stick. It's an all carrot, no stick version of hourly pricing. It operates under a similar premise where when we see those price spikes, so those days when we're using the most energy, we want people to use less during those times. So peak time savings is for folks who might not be able to benefit from hourly pricing due to the inability to shift your usage or whatever it might be. So if you sign up for peak time savings, they'll notify you of whenever there is a peak time event or when we do see those spikes. So in this example here, it's Friday, August 19th, and they said from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., use less than you typically would. And if you do, you get approximately $1 per kilowatt hour that you saved. If not, if you end up using more or about the same, nothing happens. Again, it's all carrot, no stick. It's just a way to incentivize people to use outside of it. You won't see the same kind of savings that you would see with hourly pricing, but you still would see some savings. And again, I think it's just a good program to be signed up for because it does kind of help with public awareness of when we have kind of like I don't want to say emergency as far as energy goes, but it just helps notify people of when we don't have as much energy as we should online at that time. And then we can try to use less outside of that and be incentivized to do so, which is kind of nice. So the last program I want to mention is the Home Energy Assessment, which is a joint program through Peoples Gas, Nicor, and ComEd. And this is where you get those free LED light bulbs, like I mentioned earlier. So if you sign up for this program, they will send out some energy experts to come and just like take a look at your home. They look at your HVAC system, windows, and all of that fun stuff, and just give you a very general report on how you're doing in terms of efficiency. But the most important piece of this program is that you get some free appliances when they come out there. So they'll do programmable thermostat if you don't already have one, LEDs in every fixture you don't already have an efficient bulb, low flow shower heads and faucet aerators, and then hot water pipe installation as well. They also, during the assessment, they'll ask you if you're like at or below a certain income. The reason they ask you that is that if you are at or below that income, you can receive a free smart thermostat and then smart power strips, which are just kind of more sophisticated or fancier surge protectors for your appliances. So if you are income qualified, you can get plugged into that. And then there is this 1-855-433-2700 number that you can call to get signed up for the program. Or you can just go on your utilities online portal or just call them with a number on their bill and just ask them for the home energy assessment, and they'll get you plugged into that. No, we are kind of pushing our time here. So I will briefly just mention some of the incentives that exist for solar, and then I'll open it up to questions that folks have. I don't think we have a ton looking at the chat, so we might have a few minutes to get into this, but I'll just mention it briefly just to make sure we have some time. So solar is a very viable option right now here in Illinois. So there's some really stellar incentives that were created federally and from the state that can reduce the cost of a solar installation here in Illinois by almost 60%. So the federal incentive covers 30% of the total cost of your solar installation, which is pretty nice. And it's been extended. It was set to tier down and then phase out recently, but due to the Inflation Reduction Act, it's still at 30% for the next 10 years. And it'll be a tax credit. So if your tax liability doesn't meet the total cost of that 30%, it can roll over for a few years, which is nice. The state also has a program called Solar Renewable Energy Credits, or SRECs, where they can basically cover the cost of about 20 to 30% of the solar installation as well. And it's based on how much electricity your system is expected to generate over 15 years, which is pretty nice. So if you have that federal and that state credit, that covers, again, about 50 to 60% of the total cost of a solar installation, which is really solid. There's also a utility policy that we have in Illinois called net metering, which you essentially get bill credits from the utility from the energy that you generate. So the way solar panels work is that they generate the energy when the sun hits them, and then that energy initially runs through your home, and then everything else, all of the extra energy, is then spit back out onto the grid, and you're credited for that energy being spit back out in the grid. The idea being is that we don't have super sunny winters here in Illinois, so then you would build a credit during the summertime to then cover some of those gloomier days during the wintertime, which is pretty nice. We are running something called a group buy program currently. We're calling it Solar Switch Chicagoland. This is again a group buy program, which is where we essentially contract and vet a couple different solar developers throughout the general Cook County area, Northern Illinois area, and then they offer a discount depending on how many folks sign up for this program. So we use group purchasing power to then get folks plugged in to solar installations. And if you go to the solarswitch.com/Chicagoland, you can check out some of the resources we have on there. And we also have a recorded webinar online where you can just kind of learn all things solar, learn about the program. And it's just, again, a really good way to learn more about what solar looks like here in Illinois and how that could potentially look on your home. So I'm going to skip all this stuff because I know I said we'll have about 15 minutes, and I know we pushed that a little bit. So I will skip to this last slide here so folks have it. This is my contact information here. I am the program coordinator at CUB. I'm always happy to chat. So if you have questions in the future, you can always reach me at mharvey, citizensutilityboard.org. And then you can always give us a ring at that hotline number again, which is 1-800-669-5556. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll turn back on my camera. And I will take a look at the questions that we have in the chat here. And then I know folks might have some questions in person, but we'll go ahead and start with the chat. And then Rachel, I'll bounce it over to you if folks do have questions in person. So Kathy asked, what do you know about IGS company and their solar panels? Is going solar save money? Solar panels are leased. So that is a really good question. I don't know a ton about IGS as a solar company, but I will say solar leases tend not to be as good of a deal as outright owning your own solar panels. A lot of times these companies want to do solar leases because they get those incentives that we mentioned earlier. They get to reap the benefits of those incentives. And then you pay basically a monthly fee to have those solar panels on your roof. Doesn't tend to be as good of a deal if you were to outright own it. If you can't outright own it because of cost or even space, like maybe you just don't have good sun exposure on your roof, there is a program called community solar. And community solar is for folks who, again, don't have necessarily the money or the space for rooftop solar. There are bigger 2 megawatt systems that are being built throughout the state. And then you can purchase a portion of that solar installation and essentially own it. It's kind of like owning shares in a company. And then you're billed separately at a discount. Every single community solar offer that we've seen so far has been at a pretty significant discount. Most of them are at a 20% reduction from ComEd's rate because they charge you per kilowatt hour for that energy. But it is, for most of these companies, 20% of a reduction from ComEd's default rate. So for example, right now, ComEd's rate is 6.8 cents. That'd be 20% of that for whatever amount of energy you procure from that solar development. And then let's say in the wintertime, the rate jumps up to 10 cents. It would still be 20% of that. It's always 20% for the lifespan of the contract. So definitely worth looking into. I will put the link in the chat here for you, Kathy. In just a second here. Cub has a very good list that we put together of all of the different community solar offers that we know of and what their contracts look like. And I will put that in the chat. And it's also in my slides. So for folks who are in person, I'll be sure to send the slides out. And in one of my slides, I have some more info about community solar and our website. Tina's asking, are you locked into community solar? And yes, the contracts tend to be pretty long. They're anywhere from like 10 to 20 years, give or take, which seems pretty alarming off the cuff. But a lot of times with these contracts, they give you some time to leave. You're not like 100% locked in. You just need to give them like 30 to 90 days notice to then leave that contract. And let's say you move from Elmhurst to Chicago or Elmhurst to Antioch, Illinois, up in Lake County, your community solar contract can move with you as long as you're staying in Northern Illinois. But as soon as you leave Northern Illinois, whether you're going downstate or you're moving out of state, you would need to relinquish that contract. So I don't know if folks online have any additional questions, but right now there's nothing else in the chat. So I don't know if folks in person have any questions now.
We do have a question here in person.
Sure.
Yes, Google was advertising a device that you plug into a wall socket that it costs around $100, I think, and supposedly it lowers your electric costs by like 30–40%. Do you know, have you heard about that?
I have heard about those. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but we do this program called Coffee with Cub once a month every Friday. And somebody asked this question on Coffee with Cub, and we did some research and we found that those devices, they clean your electricity in your home, which I don't quite know exactly what that means, but from what we've looked into, they don't reduce how much your devices are actually using. I don't think there would actually be a way to do that outside of having something in the device itself that's doing that. So I would stay clear of that. There are some devices called kilowatt. A lot of times libraries offer those. So I don't know if the Elmhurst Public Library rents those out, but they're pretty cheap too. So if they don't, you can get them online or at a hardware store for like 10–15 bucks. And those you can plug in to the wall, and then you plug the device into the kilowatt, and you can see how much energy that device is drawing. So that way you could better identify if you have a device that's drawing more than it should. For example, big ticket items like a refrigerator have a base plate and show how much energy it should be drawing. And if you see that it's drawing much more, then you could, kind of identify that the appliance is getting older and maybe it's time to make a change. So I think I would look into more like a kilowatt than one of these other devices, because I don't think they can actually lower how much energy these devices are using. And Tina says that it sounds like if she's talking about the Elmhurst Library, it sounds like y'all might rent that. So
We do rent out kilowatts here at Elmhurst Public Library.
sweet.
Anyone who's an Elmhurst resident with a card can come check those out. And I believe we have a follow-up question here.
Sure.
Oh, no.
So cleaning up the power, if you take a look at, I have a Ting device and it gives me a report of the voltage variance that comes into the, off the grid. And it's really wide ranging sometimes. And what that tries to do is kind of clean up the power spikes or lack of power, if you will. because dirty power can cost a lot of money. But it's not going to be totally effective within a household. You really need a whole house type of device, and those are expensive. I would always strongly recommend getting a power strip, a very good power strip for all of your electronic devices, TVs, stereos, computers, that kind of stuff, because it saved me more than once. So, and they can monitor the electric as well. So,
Yeah, there are some really good power strips out there. So that's definitely good advice, especially they call them smart power strips, the more sophisticated ones. And those can be a really big boon for most households as like a surge protector, but also as like a combatant to vampire power.
so going to vampire power, I have a power strip for the TV and stereo and stuff like that. The TV is always on, the cable box is always on. Does it make sense to use it for that?
Potentially, it depends on if you're actually like using something like a DVR, you might not want to turn that stuff off. Or something like if you have your internet set up in the same area, you wouldn't want to turn off the Wi-Fi. But if it's something that you're not like actively recording anything, or you're not actively using it, you could benefit from using a smart power strip in that area. Because the way smart power strips work is that they have like the quote unquote master device or the main device that you can plug in, usually a TV and an entertainment system setup. And then the subsequent devices like DVD player, gaming systems, you can then plug in as the auxiliary devices. And when you turn on the TV as your main device, it opens up the circuits. And then when you turn off the TV, it turns them off as if you're like flipping the power switch. So it just kind of streamlines that process. So if you're not actively using something that's like passively recording or whatever, or like your internet, something that you need online at all times, it definitely is worth it. And then we have another question in the chat here. If we get a utility assessment, how can we find vendors that are good? Windows installation, storm windows. That is a good question. I think Better Business Bureau is always a good resource. There are some trade allies with utility companies for certain like upgrades and stuff. So those might be worthwhile looking into. But I think at the end of the day, if you are getting work done, it's just worthwhile to look at like Google reviews. Word of mouth is always good, and just make sure that they're vetted. But Better Business Bureau, again, it's a really good resource for that too. Are there any more questions in person or online?
So unless anyone has a question online.
I don't think so. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I really wish I was with everybody in person. I appreciate everybody's flexibility. Hopefully didn't want to get you guys sick, and hopefully I don't get more sick. I think I'm kind of stable here, so we'll see. But it was really nice talking to everybody, and big shout out to the Elmhurst Public Library for having us out. Always happy to do it. And again, you can always give me a ring or shoot me an email if folks have any follow-up questions. I'm always happy to chat and set up a time to go over whatever questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Matt. And you said you were going to send your slides to me, and I'll send them out to everyone who registered with an email address.
Great, that sounds good. I'll download them as a PDF, and I'll send them out probably tonight or tomorrow morning.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
All right, thanks everybody. Take care.